us apart, but the way I feel won't get me through the night. You and I must be together as shadows do collide. Whispers and tongues, your dressing gown awaits for your return. You and I will fall 100 floors to embrace God's honest truth. You and I.
Later this year, I will celebrate my 20th year of owning and driving electric vehicles. My first electric car, if you can call it that, wasn't particularly fancy. It definitely wasn't quick. And it started a bit of a love affair that not only saw me become a very big EV advocate, but also someone who made EVs her day job. And my journey with electric vehicles started long before I actually got behind the wheel and drove one for myself. In fact, you can chase my interest in EVs right back to the early 1980s when I saw one in a book and went, wow, that is cool. And for the last 10 years or so, I've enjoyed seeing automakers grow their interest in EVs. I've seen more and more people around the world get behind the wheel of an EV for the first time, get the EV grin. But late on Friday, just as I was preparing the TN News Roundup show, it had already been recorded and I was just putting the final touches to it. Buried in the late Friday afternoon news releases was a story about General Motors. And a story about General Motors announcing that the all-new 2027 Chevrolet Bolt EV, a car that I went down to LA to drive less than 4 months ago, was going to end production very shortly. A car that had taken all of the things that were good about the first generation Chevrolet Bolt EV and the Bolt EUV, addressed some of the bad bits, improved on battery packs and specs and charging, and really could have been a great future product for the brand. Really is going to be as limited production as GM warned it might be. And it's starting to feel like the last 20 years of progress that we've made on more environmentally friendly vehicles, the progress that we've made on trying to make the world a better place for everyone, have just been thrown in the bin. I mean, trash can, because this is a very particular problem. And it's a very particular problem for America. At some point in the not too distant future, like the famous film, Who Killed the Electric Car, we are going to look for blame. We are going to try and finger point and figure out who it was who decided that automakers were going to suddenly push back against EVs and suddenly start investing in gas-guzzling SUVs and V8 engines all over again, despite the fact that last year was one of the warmest on record. And the uncomfortable truth for anyone who lives in the US, including me, is that we brought this on ourselves. Less than 4 months ago, at the beginning of October last year, I was invited down to Los Angeles to experience and see and drive the 2027 Chevrolet Bolt EV. It was a special event held at the Universal Backlot in LA, and it was an event designed to give existing owners a chance to look at the Bolt EV before its actual official launch. And GM gave it a soft launch because GM, well, it wasn't really a new car for the brand. It looked almost identical to the 2023 Chevrolet Bolt EUV, this car's slightly larger, slightly less nimble sibling. But for the 2027 model year, the new Bolt had a new battery pack, an LFP battery pack. It had improved fast charging up to 150 kilowatts DC using a NACS connector, that's the Tesla supercharger standard. And it also had a pretty low price tag. You could get one from $28,000 US. At least that's what GM told us. And GM also said it would be available as a limited production car, and then GM would examine the future of the car later on. But as I learned late on Friday last week, it appears GM has already made the decision. And there's definitely some blame to be laid at the foot of certain people and certain politicians, and I would argue every single voting American today. On Friday last week, GM confirmed that as of the end of this year, it's going to convert the Fairfax manufacturing plant in Kansas to produce ICE vehicles. Now, that facility has just undergone a massive investment by GM into the second generation Bolt EV. It's a facility that has received upgrades. GM even committed to building LFP batteries in the US at a facility in Tennessee with its battery partner, LG Energy Solutions. Sorry, road's a little bumpy through here. And it felt, at least it seemed to feel, like GM was like, okay, we're gonna test the water, we're gonna see how this feels, and if people really like it, we'll make more. But the fact that it's going to convert its facility to ICE vehicles in order to bring its currently Chinese-made Envision to the US, and then eventually join it on the same production line with the Equinox, not the Equinox EV, you understand, the all-American gas-guzzling version. That facility is no longer going to be an EV plant, but will be 100% ICE-based. And for the people who work there, it's going to be a bit of a change. I'm sure that many won't mind transitioning from EV to ICE again, but I think some people will. And I think a lot of customers will. The Bolt EV is a car that's a little special in my heart. Who am I kidding? It's a very special car. It was the first EV that I bought brand new in the US. It was a car that I drove very many long distance trips to. My first Bolt EV, which is not this car, this is my partner's car, drove me to many a convention, and even drove the entire team down to Las Vegas for CES on multiple occasions, sometimes in really terrible weather. And it survived. It drove me down to LA to an awards ceremony a couple of years ago. And seeing it removed from production in 2023 was a punch in the gut. But GM said, hey, don't worry, it's coming back. We'll make it again. It'll be okay. Except, I think that was just placation. GM said at the time that due to popular demand from owners, the Bolt EV was going to come back, but hey, it was going to be a limited production vehicle. And now we know that limited production really does mean 18 months. So why? Why, after all this time, all of this investment in a new facility, or at least a new production line, to bring the Bolt EV back, is it being cancelled? Like, what's really going on? It's really expensive to invest money into bringing a new car into production. And car companies hate bringing vehicles to production for very short periods of time because it makes it almost impossible for them to recoup any investment made. Now, for the Bolt EV, the 2027 Bolt EV, things are slightly different because GM is reusing all of the body tooling that it had from the 2023 Bolt EUV, right? So it's already saved a lot of money there. It's reusing a lot of the parts bin that it's got for its other EVs. And it's using a new, cheaper LFP battery pack, which will save it costs further down the road. And the new Bolt EV has some great USPs, right? 150 kilowatt DC fast charging at Tesla superchargers or any other NACS compatible charging station. That's pretty huge. Also, it's dramatically improved on the 50 kilowatt that this car can handle. And as I noted when we drove down to LA, while it's possible to drive a Bolt EV much longer distances now than you used to, because you can stop more frequently to charge and you can maximize your charging so that you spend shorter times at every charging station and get back on the road to make it as efficient an experience as possible. The new Bolt EV also brought with it some great new features, like the ability to power your home from your EV in a power cut from a $30,000 MSRP car. No other EV to date has offered that for such a low price. And yet, GM has thrown that all away. So now let's ask why. As you might know from the history books, GM is no stranger to killing electric cars. And while you might think that I am referring to the GM EV1, the oh-so amazing two-seater EV of the early thousands that was unceremoniously removed from lease and crushed, there are other cars that GM has kind of made very short production runs of. And the one that comes to mind is, of course, the Chevrolet Volt with a V. Now, the first generation Chevrolet Volt existed for a fairly normal amount of time. It got some mild updates to its battery capacity and a few tweaks, ending its official first generation production in sort of 2014, 2015. And then GM said, hey, we're going to make the second generation Volt. And it was unveiled in 2016 as a 2017 model year. If memory serves correctly, I might be wrong about that. It might have been 15 or 16. But it only lasted until the middle of 2019 when GM went, you know what, we're done now. We're not going to do that anymore. So it's worth remembering that the second generation Chevrolet Volt with a V was debuted at the tail end of 2016, along with the concept of the Bolt with a B. And there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement about it. And GM was very positive about this new second generation Volt. But shortly thereafter, Donald Trump was elected for the first time as president of the United States. And shortly thereafter, GM seemed to go, you know what, maybe we don't need the Volt. I was willing to let that slide once, but now we're seeing it again. The 2027 Chevrolet Bolt EV was promised as coming before President Trump was re-elected for a second term, and was promised at a time when it looked like Kamala Harris was going to become the next president of the US and take over from Joe Biden. But that didn't happen. And GM, which had already promised that it was going to be making this new EV, kind of found itself making this new EV. Okay, then we have tariffs, right? There's been lots of tariffs promised on all kinds of things, including steel, aluminium, materials, batteries, and vehicles themselves. And that's hit the auto industry incredibly hard. Removing tariffs would help the auto industry dramatically. But as President Trump continues to ramp up the rhetoric and threaten countries around the world, including nearby neighbors, it's It's a volatile situation that no sane business person would willingly endure. And I want to be clear here. I'm not making excuses for GM because I am really furious with GM. GM's decision to move its LFP production to Tennessee should have helped with that. But yet, the Trump administration removed all incentives for EVs, all purchase incentives for EVs. So next, I want to talk about the perfect storm of this. EV incentives have ended. Tariffs on imported goods are continually changing. It's an extremely volatile situation. And automakers are facing a government that's telling them not to produce EVs and to produce gas guzzlers. So GM did what it, I would argue, has always had a propensity to do, and that a lot of businesses always have a propensity to do, and that is to do whatever makes them the most money and keeps Wall Street happy, because if Wall Street is happy with a company, then a president who is obsessed with the stock market is also happy. Add in a president who doesn't believe in climate change, who says it's a hoax, that says EVs are terrible and don't go far and are horrid. That car and this car and any other EV that goes against that is not just an enemy to the mission, but is a testament to the truth that those in power currently don't want to exist. At the tail end of last year, Ford announced the F-150 Lightning was going to be cancelled and would be replaced with a plug-in range extended variant, because that's what people wanted. But the Ford F-150 Lightning was America's best-selling electric pickup last year, and it was cancelled. And last year, GM sold more EVs than anyone other than Tesla. So it had the market share, and with a 2027 Bolt EV, it had a car that ticked a lot of those boxes. It was smaller. It was built for both urban travel and also short distance trips. It had better charging capability, better performance, a nicer, more modern interior by some people's designs, although I actually prefer the classic interior. And it also promised to save GM a lot of money because of that reused parts bin and reused body panels. But EVs are not in vogue as far as the US administration is concerned. In every other market around the world, EVs are in demand, they are growing, and while the US is pushing back, or rather, a few select politicians are pushing back, we face an era of uncertainty where EVs that ticked all the boxes for a lot of people are not welcome. And so GM is rolling over. It wants to keep the administration happy. It wants to keep its shareholders happy. And it will make whatever it is asked to make. It's already committed to spending a massive amount of money this year on designing and building new V8 engines, when just a few years ago it said, yeah, we're going to really go all electric. And it makes you wonder, if big automakers are willing to do this, who else is willing to do this? I know this has been long and rambly, and I'm sorry, and I'm going to get lots of people very angry with me in the comments about how this is not a clear video and I'm just rambling, and you know what? I'm okay with that. Because at the end of the day, this is a political move, and we need to call it what it is. But to finish, I want to address those of you who say, oh, well, GM was losing money on EVs and Ford is losing money on EVs. And oh, we can't possibly lose money on EVs. We just cannot sustain this. Ever heard of the Prius? The Toyota Prius, the first generation Toyota Prius, first appeared in 1997. It was a weird little car. It's a little tiny sedan, designed for Japan, eventually made it to the US and other markets. But it gave rise to the second generation Prius. I owned 3 of those second generation Priuses, by the way. Still my favorite Prius generation. Hatchback, quite nerdy, but enough mainstream goodness that you could live with it on a daily basis. And it wasn't until Toyota was already well into making its third generation Prius. So this would have been 2012, 2013, that we learned that it was finally turning a profit on all of those hybrids. On the Prius specifically, it took Toyota from 1997 to 2010, 11, 12, somewhere in that vicinity, to turn a profit on hybrid tech. And today, Toyota is pretty synonymous with hybrid engine tech. Toyota played the long game, and it paid off. It's also one of the reasons why Toyota is so reticent to move to EVs, because it spent so much money and time investing in hybrids, and boy, is it going to get its dollars worth, or maybe it's its yen's worth out of it. My beloved often tells me a phrase that is quite popular with investment types. And the notion is this: time in the market beats timing the market. The idea that the longer you have invested money in the stock market with your pension, the better it is. Sure, you can be one of those clever sorts who watches the markets every single day and is a bit of an amateur trader and is constantly moving your stock around to try and maximize your return on the investment. And the risks on that are massive. But the reality is that for most people, putting your money in the stock market and leaving it and letting it grow naturally will end up giving you more at the end of the day. And every company that plays this silly political game, as American citizens are being murdered in the streets, they're not playing the long game. They're trying to get rich or die trying. And if climate change has its way, they might get what they want. I know this video has been long and boring. Sorry, my mental health's not in a good place right now, and it's probably far better than I think, but thank you for watching to the end. And if you have watched to the end, let me know what your favorite thing about the Bolt EV is, and let me know which car you think is going to be next on the corporate chopping block of Donald Trump. And let me know when you think this is going to change, when it's going to end, or if the US is just going to be the country that is so far behind on EVs that it's going to be laughed at by the rest of the world. If you can, please consider supporting us from $1.50 a month on Patreon. It's a wonderful list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. Without you guys, we wouldn't be able to do it, and it really does mean a lot to me that you support us on a daily basis. I've been talking to some of you over the last weekend. You all rock. You are amazing. And if you are protesting, please do so peacefully and safely. And tell the person that means a lot to you that they mean a lot to you, because you never know what's going to happen next. Keep evolving.